2, clear takeoff, left hand. Takeoff left, this is speed 1. Left land, swim west, copy. Speed 1. Crossing 2-4. Crossing at 2-4 is
Hello and welcome to the Blueskies podcast. I'm PR Ganapathy, your host.
Just 70, roger, report type southeast, connection, speed 4, midway, and field selected.
It is my great pleasure today to welcome to the program Air Marshal Samir Borade. Air Marshal Borade was commissioned into the engineering stream of the Indian Air Force in 1987 and he retired just recently on 31st Jan 2022, holding numerous staff and command posts. Air Marshal Borade has many years of experience working on different aircraft at different stages, particularly the MiG-29. We are going to speak to him today about engineering and technical support in the Indian Air Force and his experiences over his many years in the Air Force. Welcome to the program, sir. Thank you so much for speaking to the audience of the Blueskies.
Thank you, Gada. Thank you very much. First of all, hearty thanks to you for inviting me to this interview. It's a real honor and privilege to be invited in this series of interviews by you from all the stalwarts of Air Force. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you, sir. The honor and the pleasure is entirely ours. So, sir, we first start off by getting to know our guests a little better. So, I'd just love to know where you grew up. What was your family background? What was your motivation to join the service? And since you're the first engineering officer I've really interviewed, I'd just love to know what it's like, the entry path for engineers into the Air Force.
Yeah, once again, thanks to you for calling an engineer. I think we're all very important part of Indian Air Force, and credit must go to you for inviting an engineer for the first time. Now, coming to your question, well, my father was in the MP state government in the dairy department, but I had a military background in the sense that my grandfather was a retired lieutenant colonel, and all my ancestors were part of the Holkar army, which was the state army those days at Indore. And in fact, my great grandfather was General Gopal Rao Borade who was the chief of the Indore state army. And my maternal grandfather was a major in British Indian Army and a World War II veteran. And again, my one of my maternal uncles had joined the Air Force, but then he had to leave because of some issues. He was a coursemate of Air Marshal Masant. So joining the Defense Forces was a natural inclination from childhood because we had that sort of environment at home. But it would be interesting to know why I chose to join Indian Air Force. Well, I will narrate an interesting incident which happened when I was in class 1 and we were staying in Gwalior near to the residency mess, which is the present residency mess. And one day on the terrace, I saw three packet aircraft dropping paratroopers. It was really a mesmerizing scene, and I was fascinated to see the aircraft. Second was, of course, watching films such as, in childhood, all those films like Hindustan Ki Kasam, Aradhna, Sangam, Hakikat, all in the initial part. I mean, a few of these movies had, Air Force background with pilots, the heroes as pilots. So when I was growing up, joining Indian Air Force was always in my mind. That was my first choice. And added to that, the 1971 war and reading about our, brave pilots That was making my decision very firm. So while I was in the school, I was so passionate that I joined the aero modeling club. I used to make models at home and preserve all the clippings from the magazines, whatever used to be covered about Indian Air Force.
Yeah, I want to tell the audience that your passion was so much and is still so great that you still have those clippings and you just shared
Yeah,
some
yeah, I have
photographs with
retained
me.
them. Yeah, I still retain them. In fact, anything related to Indian Air Force, I've always retained, including my mementos. I'm going to display them in my new house, which is under construction. So then, of course, I appeared for the NDA, but somehow, my results didn't reach me. And then I joined college, where I joined the Air Wing NCC. But I was just about to commence my gliding and flying. That is the time I got a call from engineering college, that is Malviya Regional Engineering College at Jaipur. And my mother advised that I should do my engineering first, and if I wish, then I can join Indian Air Force later. So obviously, during my fourth year of engineering, those days it used to be a 5-year course, and I appeared for the SSB. In my first attempt, I was cleared, and as soon as I completed my engineering, I joined the 31 Aeronautical Engineers course. That was in March '87. I reached Air Force Technical College, Jalhali. Of course, due to my results, which were little delayed, I was the last to join my course, and it was really little difficult initially, as 1 month had already passed, the course had already commenced.
Don't mind me asking, sir, what was your engineering specialization?
Yeah, I am a mechanical engineer, and
Mhm.
those days it used to be only mostly four uh, streams: mechanical, civil, electrical, and electronics. So I was passionate about mechanical engineering right from beginning. In fact, this Air Force and mechanical engineering thing was going hand in hand, you know all during my childhood days. So coming to the training part, uh, of course it involved both professional studies and the usual military training. And aerodynamics was a new subject to us. Being from mechanical background, we had not studied that, and it was a little difficult to understand. However, with the love for aeroplanes, I used to put in extra hours during weekends, or in the evening, and read the books, especially aero engines and aerodynamics. And of course, we had very, very good instructors who motivated us to study, and made us understand these subjects of aero engines, airframe, and aerodynamics. And it was made very easy for us to understand. And of course, more important is that the interest in aviation was developed into us at that time at AFTC.
Mhm.
Now, once we completed our course, it was a 1.5 years course, 3 semesters of 6 months each. Uh, One more interesting thing I would like to narrate here is, at the end of second semester, when our merit list is made, I was we are supposed to be we are asked the choices, which stream would you like to go into, and somehow I was little fascinated about helicopters aerodynamics, so I applied for helicopters. So I was called by the chief instructor in his office, and he asked me, why did you choose helicopters? So I said, I like helicopters. And in fact, those days we thought, we can go into helicopters, land at different places and see around the country. So actually I was actually, little the instructor told me that your performance is much better and you must opt for fighters. So then I changed my option to fighters. And when our postings were announced at the end of third term, because of our merit, you know, uh, probably the first two officers were selected for Mirages, and the next two were, I was fourth in the merit, and I was selected for MiG-29. So before that, I must like to tell you that I was when the signal came, it was for 28 Squadron, And somebody, I didn't know where is 28 Squadron, so I was told by someone it's at Tejpur. And next day, I think was Saturday or Sunday, I had gone to Brigade Road for some work, and I saw a magazine in the newspaper shop which had some photograph of fighter aircraft on the cover page. So I picked it up, and I was, when I was back at AFTCA in the night, I was reading that magazine. So it was about MiG-29 induction, and it mentioned 28 Squadron. So actually, I was so thrilled that day that I'm actually posted to a MiG-29 Squadron.
Right, right. My father's old, my father's old squadron.
Yeah, yeah, it's so nice to know that 28 Squadron is such a illustrious squadron, and your father was also in the same.
Yes, current chief, in fact, also commanded 20.
Yes, yes, the present chief is also commanded 28.
Right. At that time, I think Winko Masan had taken over. The squadron had moved and had was in the process of converting, moving from Tezpur to Pune,
No,
right?
yeah, actually, the squadron had already come to Pune. In fact, that is the time when I read in the magazine that the induction, it was the magazine had actually covered the induction ceremony, and it was a center. I mean, it was a main article in Frontline. I remember that, and of course, that was another pleasure that I'm going to Pune. Of course, it's not my hometown, but going to Pune and MiG-29 squadron was really a good feeling. So I arrived at Air Force Station Lohegaon. I remember the date, that was 15th of August 1988. The squadron was there, and on 16th of August, I reported to the squadron. My STO was Squadron Leader Sadbir Singh Best, SS Best, who is now no more unfortunately. And he took me and introduced to the commanding officer, Wing Commander Harish Masan, and of course I had received his DO letter before that, and it was another pleasure to meet him. I had known him earlier by his name because he was my uncle's course mate too,
Right, right.
and incidentally we belong to the same place, Indore,
That's
and
correct. Yeah. Mm.
we are from the same school as well.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he has been a previous guest on the program and has, been a great supporter of the Blue Skies.
In fact, now both of us are staying together in a small place called Mau near Indore, and we are of course golf partners on the weekends.
So, we're familiar with the squadron structure, but what is the engineering component of a squadron? How is that organized, if you can share?
Okay, those days because the squadron was new, we had four engineering officers in the squadron, including the senior engineering officer. Those days he used to be called the STO, senior technical officer, and that was called it a BIST. Second was that time my just 1 year senior Abhijit Roy, and I was the third to join. And I think that time Colonel Jagdale was also there, so he was number two. So I was the junior most in the squadron. So in a squadron, typically MiG-29 for many years I've seen they had four engineering officers. So that was the engineering setup.
Mhm. And what fleet size would the squadron have? So, about 18 aircraft, 16 aircraft?
Yeah, the fighters component is about 16 aircraft and two trainers. So that was
Right.
our strength, 16
So,
plus two.
just four officers and some of them fairly junior sounds really very low. It's obviously a very efficient kind of a setup.
Yeah, I mean, I think four officers are not less. No. The main issue is how competent the officers are. Plus, we have a good strength of technical airmen who are there. So, good composition is, of course, if there are more officers, it's always good. But I think four officers are adequate for a squadron. And with four officers and some senior airmen, technicians, especially the main strength of the engineering stream in a squadron is, of course, good technicians, uh, ably led by the junior warrant officers or the master warrant officers.
Got
And
it.
of course,
Right.
this question I would like to answer in a different way also, because MiG-29 was a new aircraft those days, and we had very typical issues, and almost everybody was, new, I would say, because we were still learning with the aircraft, trying to understand the aircraft, the technical part of it. So it was a difficult proposition those days. So this aircraft or the fleet which is little old or well stabilized, there of course the strength does not matter. I mean, strength of course matters in terms of manpower, in the sense there should be adequate people to handle the job,
Right.
but there are no first time issues which are emerging. So we had a typical challenge of, though we had senior airmen, but they were equally, I would say, novices, or they could do the management part of it. But when it came to the snag rectification or understanding typical snags which were emerging for the first time, it was a little challenging situation.
And had some of these been part of the contingent that went and got trained in Russia?
Yes, yes, yes. In fact, I think most of the pilots and the STO who was there with us, they had all been trained abroad in Russia, except for two youngsters like me and Abhijit Roy, who were the first time were not trained abroad and were directly posted from AFTC to the squadrons. Same was the situation with the other squadron too. So a large number of engineering officers and airmen were trained in Russia at that time, and they all got back and formed the squadron, and they were the initial component of the squadron, except for you know people like us who had just joined the squadron directly from the college.
Okay.
Visual to shoot before Just 870, Roger, report IP southeast, connection, for midway, field selected.
So, sir, you spent 4 years in engineering, then you spent 3 terms, as 1.5 years in AFTC, where you were taught about engineering as applied to aviation or military aircraft. And now you come to the squadron. So I presume there's a phase of getting to know this particular aircraft. What's that process like?
Yes. Firstly, I'll cover the Air Force Technical College part of it. Uh, in the first term, you are actually exposed to the aerodynamics and aero engines, which though it's little difficult, but it's not all that difficult also to understand. The aero engine and airframe part, we had very good instructors who used to not only teach us theory, but familiarize us with the practical part of it. And in the course curriculum those days, in the second and third term, we were also being exposed to the MiG-21 systems. So we were
Mhm.
fairly exposed to the systems part of it, the main systems of the aircraft. And during the practical phase also, we had adequate number of training aids at the college where we could have a look at them and fairly appreciate how the system functions. In fact, I will tell you that on we were so interested that on weekends we used to have that those diagrams taken to our room, and we would understand how each component of a aero engine or each component of airframe works.
Right, right.
And our instructors at times used to give us some challenge of throwing a snag at us and telling if this has happened, what could be the cause. So some sort of little sort of brainstorming used to take place. So as far as theoretical part is concerned of the basic aircraft, we were fairly clear about it. But coming to the squadron and seeing the MiG-29, when you see the aircraft actually of that side, it's a different scenario altogether. You really need don't know which component is fitted where. And our MCF, those days it used to be called MCF, now it's Tetra School of 6 months.
What does MCF stand for, sir?
uh, MCF is a maintenance conversion flight. It used to be called maintenance conversion flight earlier days, which is basically a training center for a particular type of aircraft or a system. So all engineers, all technicians have to undergo that course before you are actually, you are actually then certified to be working on that particular type of aircraft or systems. Same is the case with pilots also. Of course, they undergo a little abridged course. For us, it was about 4 months. Now that has been converted to TETRAs, technical type training schools, which is about 6 months course.
Mhm.
So it's fairly elaborate course where everybody undergoes very thorough training, technical training, and they have very good training aids. Nowadays, there are maintenance simulators also. But in our time, probably because the aircraft was new and we didn't have much of training aids, so it was a little difficult thing to learn. Again, we were learning only the theory part of the aircraft. The practical learning actually started only when I reported to the squad. And of course, our guides were there, including the senior engineering officer and some airmen who were quite clueful. So together, actually, we were learning. And since the aircraft was new, so many snags were first time snags. So we had to actually sit down with the system diagrams, do brainstorming along with the airmen. Also, uh, work out what could have gone wrong, discuss with the pilots. So it used to take a little more time to do a rectification.
Can you give us some examples so that we get a sense for what is
Yeah.
this like?
Now, we had, I can tell you one interesting incident which happened. We had Dasi visit going on. And Dasi, of course, I think that's
The
Directorate
audience may
of Air
not
Staff
know, so
Inspection.
yes.
Yeah, it's a Directorate of Air Staff Inspection which inspects a station and every unit to see their operational preparedness. And we had this inspection ongoing, and the commanding officer, that time Wing Commander Mukherjee, he he was flying along with the formation, and I think Dasi number one was also in the formation. And the aircraft returned with a snag, and CO told me that the fuel was actually gushing out from the aircraft.
Mhm.
So this was the first time when I heard of it. By that time, I must have spent about 6 months in the squadron, and my STO had come from a different stream. By that time, there was a change, and we were trying to find out. Now, going through the system diagram, we tried changing few components, but it's difficult to replicate such snag on the ground.
Right,
That was
right.
another challenge. So finally, we came to a component, which is a main component, which is, I'm forgetting the name of that component, which is actually got few walls in it, and it's under the control linkages. So we had to replace that, and finally, the air snag was cleared. Next time we had a similar snag coming, and it was so easy that people knew, okay, where to target this.
So the materials that the Russians had provided us were not any help in these matters. What sort of documentation do you get? Which language is it in?
See, MiG-29, I think India was the first country where this aircraft was, given other than Russia. And probably Russians also had not flown this aircraft too much. So these publications are made by the designers, So,
Hmm.
the designers know the system, so they will see that, okay, what sort of snacks can come. So they give you some elementary snack trees where, they will give you a series of instructions where if this is gone wrong, then this try and do this, then try and do this. So it's by trying, I mean, doing some sort of elimination and some change of components. But designers may not be able to appreciate this fact that when the aircraft actually gets into operational flying, after few years there will be other components or systems which will have some malfunctioning. So these are the things you have to actually learn by yourself, and
Mm.
of course having a thorough technical knowledge in terms of the systems. And there are many such incidents which I remember, or snag rectifications. Another was very interesting snag rectification where we had the generator failing again and again, and we went through the snag tree suggestion by the publication. We tried rectifying it, and in fact there were two or three generators which actually packed up. No, I didn't know what's actually going wrong. Then we got into that. So we knew there is a fuel oil cooler which cools the oil of this generator. So, suspecting the fuel oil cooler, we replaced the fuel oil cooler. It didn't work. So finally tracing it back, there was an active fuel pump which is, running run by the fuel. And when I checked the pressure of that, it was not mentioned in the publication, but I saw there was a tapping point near that pump, and we connected a gauge and found that there is zero pressure in that. So we could make out that actually the fuel is not going into the fuel oil cooler. The oil is getting overheated, and then that's how the generator is getting packed up. So I took my chance. Of course, those days, the distinction between first and second line servicing. Of course, we can discuss what is first and second line later.
Oh, definitely. I want to understand that. Yes.
Every we used to take those chances. That this is, it is not a first. It may not be bound by a first line activity. So I removed the pump, and it was actually a. I saw the splines which are there on the shaft, which is run by the gearbox. The splines were totally worn out, and that's how the pump was not running. So actually, we had to replace the entire gearbox in that. And after 2 or 3 months, or within next 3 months, we had three similar incidents, and we could straightway home on ki yes, now these gearboxes have got a problem. Maybe it was a series of big gearboxes which had this problem, and in my entire career, I knew only these three cases like this happened on ground. And fourth was, of course, when that time Flight Lieutenant Zakaria, he was flying from Pune to I think Uttarlai or Jaisalmer for taking over the ORP, and he had heard of the snag. And when he had a AC generator failure warning in the air, he doubted the gearbox. Because he had heard me telling that this gearbox can have a problem. So this is how go about doing the rectification, or you know trying to resolve the issues.
Wow. Amazing. So tell us about this first line service, second line service. What's that? And what are the routine maintenance tasks that, need to be performed on a fighter aircraft? How is it different from, say, civil aircraft? How is it different between, say, Western and Eastern fleets? I know the Eastern fleets are a little more maintenance intensive, but they're also very rugged. So just love to hear your thoughts on some of these things.
Okay, I think you got three or four questions in that.
I'm sorry.
Firstly, elaborating. No issues. I will try and remember. If I've forgotten, then you can remind me.
Sure.
So the first is the levels of servicing. Uh, the first line servicing is basically what you are doing at the squadron level, where daily operations are on. So that's called DSS, or daily servicing section.
Give us examples of what sorts of things happen there.
Yeah, I will just elaborate that. So at the DSS, basically your job is to make the aircraft ready for the missions, or the flying as per the flying program. That the morning or the first line servicing is carried out in terms of pre-flight servicing. So they're all mentioned in the publication. You have task cards for that, and the technicians will undertake those checks to see that all systems are performing well. MiG-29, fortunately, we had a lot of built-in test procedures where the computers could do the checks themselves, and indicate that the systems are performing well.
Okay.
And typically, we have to check the engine oil levels, the oxygen levels, the refueling has to be carried out, air charging has to be done, and then the aircraft is certified fit for flying. So that's the basic job of a daily servicing section, or the first line.
Mhm.
But there are, being a military aircraft, there will be some snags coming on the aircraft during regular flying. So some snags are simple to handle, where the squadron itself can undertake that rectification by changing few components. So we have a rectification team within the squadron. It's called a maintenance gang, which will undertake some scheduled servicing, normal basic servicing like 50 hours, or 60 plus 5 days servicing, which used to be there in MiG-29s, and maintain the aircraft. But beyond that, know, there are certain major activities such as 100-hour servicing or 200-hour servicing or 400-hour servicing, which is little lengthy, uh, involves more technical activities and major rectifications which may be beyond the scope of the squadron, or at times the squadron may not be adequately equipped to in terms of manpower or equipment
Hmm.
to undertake those particular jobs like engine change or undercarriage change. So that activity is undertaken by the second line servicing. At each station we will have a tech flight. So that tech flight is under the chief engineering officer and it's part of the station. So tech flight is actually supporting the squadron in terms of undertaking the second line servicing.
Aha, got it.
Next level is third and fourth line. Now, fourth line today is also called D level servicing. It's basically the base repair depots of Indian Air Force who undertake this job, where the aircraft undergoes for major overhaul, or if there is a very very serious snag, which there are very rare instances like that where there will be a serious snag which the station can not undertake. So that is the time this aircraft for mainly for major overhauls it will go to the BRDs,
Hmm.
and there are few fleets which are HL supported like Jaguar or Mirages. The aircraft is sent to the to HL, respective HL division.
Okay, got it.
And third line is something where the aircraft may sustain some major damage or it is recoverable at site, maybe I mean at the squadron level or the station level. The BRD team or HL team will go to the station and repair that aircraft or rectify that aircraft and recover that aircraft. So
Aha.
that's the third line servicing. So these are the basic divisions, how the or echelons of maintenance, the way it functions.
Visual to before visualize. Just need 70, like your report IP southeast, connection, before. Somebody's way, field still active.
Can you give me a sense for, say the fourth line major overall? That happens after how many hours of flying? And typically that's 6 months, that's 1 year. That's how many years does that typically take?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. Um, Most of the fighter aircraft, including the MiG-29, the major servicing is based on both operational hours as well as calendar.
Mm,
So calendar life is around nine. I mean, that's the basic philosophy is about 9 years,
right. Uh-huh.
and 800 hours or 1,000 hours of flying is the operational hours based on which the major overall is undertaken.
Got it. Uh-huh.
So it will be either of them, whether it's calendar which is getting due early or operational hours are getting due early. Accordingly, the aircraft will be inducted. But most of the times, what happens is the operational hours, if they are not able to be consumed within that calendar life, the base repair depot or HL may also give an extension on the calendar life. How it has done, I'll briefly elaborate on that as well. Calendar life of 9 years is basically derived by the life of the rubber, because aircraft has a lot of rubberized components, sealing rings at different places, there may be thousands of them. So it's basically defined by that. And of course, other related issues which are time dependent, like corrosion and the weathering effect on the aircraft, because of which the aircraft has to be inducted for based on calendar life. Now, if you're not able to complete the operational hours during that period, because otherwise you have to finish those 800 hours in 9 years at times, because the aircraft is on ground for certain reasons, so you can't complete that. So the calendar life extension is given, and we have done in most of the fleets in the MiG series, at least I'm aware, right from MiG-21, MiG-23, MiG-27, MiG-29. The calendar life extension has been done, but that extension is or life revision is mainly after a thorough study which is undertaken. A lead aircraft which has completed those many years will be inducted at BRD. The checks will be carried out. What is the condition of the aircraft? What is the condition of the sealing rings? It may involve some sort of aging, artificial aging also, where you will subject to that few rubberized parts to artificial aging process and see what is their condition. So based on this sort of study, and this study is done either by the BRD or the HL, and of course certified by the CEMILAC, that is Center for Military Air, but there is certification. They have RCMAs at major locations, the
Mm,
regional centers for military airworthiness,
okay.
and there are DRDO scientists there who are involved in this study. And once this study is approved, uh, recommended of course by the BRD or HL, and approved by air headquarters, then the extension is granted or life revision is granted. In fact, nowadays the word which is used is life revision. It is more scientific. And second part is operational hours. So, based on operational hours, also the aircraft is inducted. On operational hours, the extension is little difficult, or more. We have to be very careful about it. And in very rare of the rare circumstances, this operational hour extension is undertaken. And there are two kinds of again overalls which are there. First is the TBO, that is to be overall, that is bit, and there is second thing which is called as TTL, that is total technical life. So total technical life of an aircraft could be 25 years or 2,500 hours. That was there in MiG-29 and similar in the other fleets as well. So TTL is the end of the life of that aircraft, and TBO is where you are repeatedly doing it within that TTL part. Means the aircraft may undergo two or three overhauls within its total technical life.
Got
So
it.
it will
Got it.
visit uh, from the squadron, it will be sent to the repair agency or D-level agency for undertaking the overhaul. TTL also we have done live revision mostly on calendar because 25 hours, probably have been quite conservative, mainly from the, for the Russian aircraft, where, we have not been able to exploit that aircraft in that period of time. And the aircraft has got adequate potential. I mean, this conservative part probably must have been more because of commercial reasons than technical reasons. And most of our aircraft have undergone life revision based on calendar. Total calendar life has been extended, and that's how we have been, utilizing all these aircraft for so many years. And of course, it's all again the way I explained to you. The entire technical study is undertaken, and then only the life revision is granted.
Fascinating. So, some of these inspection schedules or this time was probably recommended by the manufacturer, but the conditions, weather conditions and whatnot that they face in their countries are perhaps very different from India. Do we do anything to translate these standards to as part of these studies?
Yes, of course, the aircraft when it is designed, they mention the operating conditions also, and operating temperatures which are defined in that. But we have mostly found that in Indian operating conditions, these aircraft take little time to stabilize because, as you know, our country is vast, with all kinds of terrains, temperatures. Jamnagar will have different, like on the sea coast. There are other issues in northern areas. There are typical winters and extreme summers. So we have issues like this emerging, especially which affect the aircraft material in terms of corrosion, where we have to. I'll just cover that part little later, and the ceiling rings get affected. So we can't do much of changes in that because the designer has designed the aircraft and fitted aircraft with the kind of material which he has utilized. But later, as part of the the monitoring system, what is there is a separate system of incident or accident or premature failure, we call it, premature withdrawals. So anytime a component has a premature withdrawal, it is sent to the repair depot, and the analysis is carried out for every time that particular component or different types of components, when they go back to the depot without completing their defined life, so analysis may reveal something which can be, some remedial actions can be put into place. So at times we have seen that certain sealing ring materials, have not been performing well, where there are repeated failures like that. So in consultation with the either the OEM, or now we got adequate, experience with us, maybe the RC local RCMs who are there. So we may go for a material change in that and try it out with a different material and see its performance as well. So
Hmm.
that's how it's a iterative process, and many such, premature withdrawals we have been able to resolve, and defect investigations also when components come for that. So you are able to, resolve those issues. At times there'll be a material which the designer has used, but there are if there are repeated failures of that, you may like to go for a better material. That can be done in consultation with the R&D agencies.
Got it, got it. And so one question I had asked is about so now that we understand the various levels of service and life, how are Western aircraft and Russian aircraft different? I know my father used to mention that they typically fly or are designed to fly for many more hours than the Russian aircraft and need a lot less routine inspections and checks and things like that. But just love to hear your perspective of how are these different?
Very interesting question. But before that, I'll just cover one part which I had forgotten. I was talking about the corrosion.
Yes.
Now, this is one, our aircraft are flying in different weather conditions, different humidity conditions, the temperatures. And a very good thing which was initiated by Indian Air Force few years ago, uh, that is the CPCP program, that is Corrosion Prevention and Control Program for all the fleets. In fact, MiG-29 was the first fleet where we had this CPCP program. Uh, that basically includes, you know, study of the aircraft, where which all components are, getting affected by corrosion, and have a corrosive anti-corrosive treatment for that. So this thing is made in a sort of a document for each type of aircraft, and technicians have been trained so that they do the preventive action before the corrosion sets in. And when the aircraft goes for overall, the symptoms are seen, and again, if there are some changes required, that is also done. So I've just covered that CPCP for the corrosion of the aircraft as well.
Got it.
Coming to your question of Western and Russian aircraft, yeah, it's a interesting and a difficult aircraft, a difficult question. But me being from Russian aircraft, we all who have worked on Russian aircraft are, in love with Russian aircraft. Why? And the basic difference is, though I've not worked physically on Western aircraft, but being in the Directorate of Maintenance Inspection, I was involved in a lot of audits and inspections for all kinds of fleets. Yes, Western aircraft are very well designed. You know, in terms of modular technology, the rectifications are much faster. The Russian aircraft, I would say, are very, very rugged, in terms of material. And I know of many incidents where a stabilizer has broken, and I remember that the pilot had come back. Today is a senior air marshal, serving air marshal, who was flying that aircraft, and I was doing the technical investigation. And I was actually amazed that the half of the portion of the stabilizer had flown off, and the
Mm.
pilot had didn't feel that at all.
Wow.
So that's the kind of, sturdiness these aircraft have in terms of not only material but by design as well. Even the aero engines also, foreign object damages, the aero engines many times sustain very, very severe damage. But I know of many incidents where the performance of the engine has been just there, and the pilot has not come to know. The aircraft has come back, landed safely. Few interesting incidents on MiG-29 I can tell you, where the aircraft landed with the combustion chamber almost burst open.
Wow.
that was a typical problem which Russians OEM came and resolved it later. But we had three such incidents where the combustion chamber, there was a gaping hole in that. I could see inside the aero engine combustion chamber, by lying down on the floor, and the aircraft came back very, very safe. So anyway, so that's the I would say the main difference has been that uh, maintenance wise, Russian aircraft, though it is said that's little difficult to maintain, but all those who have all of us who have worked on Russian aircraft, we have learned the tricks how to overcome all these basic problems.
Mm.
It's not all that difficult as well. This question, interestingly, I can narrate to you. I was chief engineering officer at Adampur, and we had Raksha Rajya Mantri at that time, Shri Pallam Raju, along with the AOP. Uh, AOP was Air Marshal
Anil Chopra, I think. Chopra, yeah.
Anil Chopra. Yeah, yeah. So they were actually going to Serek School, Kapurthala. There was some function there, and they had landed at Adampur. And we went for a cup of tea in the duty crew room. And he saw Shri Pallam Raju saw a photograph of Mirage and MiG-29 flying together. So he asked this question to the AOC, that which aircraft is better, Western or Russian? And AOC quickly redirected that question to me. And I mean, me being from MiG-29s and Air Marshal Chopra from Mirages,
Mirages.
I couldn't take sides. I could not take sides. So I told him the same thing. Both types of aircraft are good. Uh, of course, the maintenance philosophies are different. The Western aircraft have better, maintenance manuals, much more easier to understand. The main problem with the Russian publications have been the translation part. That is, you have to actually decipher what the publication is trying to tell you. So that's a little challenging part, and all of us who have worked have learned how to overcome that. So these are the basic issues.
Visual to you before you visualize. Just need 7B, like your report type southeast, connection, before midway, and you will select it.
So, sir, I saw from your photographs you were involved with the MiG-29 upgrade. And so just love to hear what was that all about, and how does one go about planning and executing such an upgrade program? Because, as we've heard from previous guests on the program, the airframe, lasts a certain lifetime, but a lot of the systems get upgraded, and that's how a platform remains relevant still for the military objective that it was procured for. So just love to hear the MiG-29 upgrade, that whole program, what was that about, and to learn from that.
Yeah, the MiG-29 upgrade was conceptualized, and the it was to be done by the OEM initially, and the it was planned that most of the avionics will get replaced by modern systems, mainly the MFDs, the instrumentation in the aircraft, and of course with the drop tanks of higher capacity, saddle tank on top, few more air-to-air refueling for this aircraft, which MiG-29 didn't have, to increase its endurance. The change of radar. So upgrade was primarily to have the aircraft, going for a longer time and with better systems. The initial upgrade was undertaken at Russia, where few of our aircraft were sent there along with a team of people who were the they were involved with the upgrade and monitoring as well. After the initial upgrade was done by the Russians, the aircraft came back to India at 11 BRD, and the remaining series upgrade was undertaken at 11 BRD. The upgrade also involved extension of the life of the aircraft from 25 to 40 years. But by the time actually upgrade was this entire process was happening, we ourselves have actually revised the life from 25 to 35 years, 35 years. by undertaking studies ourselves at 11 BRD.
Hmm.
So in terms of calendar life, we we are about to reach 40 years now, probably for the first lot of aircraft now, maybe in 2026. And second was the structural upgrade which Russians had undertaken. Now, when the series upgrade started at 11 BRD, uh, in the overall process is a very it's a very different kind of maintenance activity where you have to document each and everything, because when you open up the aircraft, there are almost 20,000 kinds of spare parts which will come out. They have to be
Hmm.
reassembled back. So you have to list down each one of them and have that document available so that nothing is missed out. So the legacy aircraft already had this system, very well oiled. But with the upgrade aircraft, that entire process has to be redone. So again, a full system has to be, installed in place. Second was the because of the saddle tank, the aircraft has to be actually cut open. And
Uh-huh.
anybody who's seen this process at 11 BRD is actually amazed to see, the kind of work we undertake.
Right.
The aircraft top portion is almost cut, and then the saddle tank is fitted. So it's a very interesting, process which takes place. And I'm talking as an engineer. But when the aircraft is upgraded and then it's flown and given to the squadron, it takes the time content of the upgrade was more as compared to normal overall, because the new systems are being fitted. The new system performance is again now, it's a challenging thing because new kinds of snacks will be coming. So that's how aircraft gets upgraded, and the entire process is undertaken accordingly.
Now, these are operational frontline squadrons. So I presume there's a schedule by which aircraft come, you work on it, upgrade it, return it to the squadron. So will there be a time when the squadron is actually operating a mixed fleet of old versus new aircraft? Is there I presume there's a training or a conversion that needs to happen for pilots to learn how to operate the new systems and so on and so forth. What's that whole process like?
I think 47 was the first squadron to convert. I remember I was a chief engineering officer then. And when the initial lot of aircraft had come to India, the few of the pilots and engineers who were supposed to operate the upgraded version had also undergone training at Russia. So they all were sent to Ozar at 11 BRD, and the upgrade aircraft were being flown there by the squadron with few lesser number of aircraft. So entire 47 squadron was at Ozar then, and they were undertaking the flying. The reason for doing undertaking the flying at Ozar was mainly so that if there are some maintenance issues or initial teething problems, they can be handled better at that place
Right,
rather
right.
than being at the operational location. Same system was done for Bison also when the initial squadrons were flying at Ozar, where HL was supporting them. So we actually the mix of aircraft will never operate in a squadron because it brings other complications,
Correct,
maintenance of
correct. Right.
flying operations. It will
Mm,
confuse the people.
yeah.
The other air squadrons, when I was at Radhampur, as I had proposed that rather than sending the entire squadron and take for them to take so much time to build up their strength, one of the squadrons is actually non-operational for quite some time. So for other squadrons, we adopted a different philosophy where the pilots and few aircraft were given to the one of the squadrons, and they were undertaking the operations together, and gradually they weaned out from the squadron and formed their own.
Mhm.
So that's how the upgrade process was undertaken.
Got it.
And when the last of the squadrons was 28, I remember their strength kept on depleting. I was commanding Air Force Station Ozar that time. So the number of aircraft were reducing because they were all being inducted for upgrade. And finally, when they were left with three aircraft, all of them flew to Adampur, sorry, Ozar together. and I was there to receive them. And they did a fly past overhead and landed, and we had a small ceremony of exchange of mementos. I gifted them some instruments of the legacy aircraft. So,
Mhm.
but by that time we were actually rolling out the upgrade aircraft, and I don't think 28 Squadron started its reformation in lesser time frame to build up their strength.
Got it. So I saw in the photographs that you shared with me, there's a photograph of you on the flight deck of the aircraft carrier. So I presume you've interacted with the Navy and their MiG-29 KUB, I think, is what they operate. So what was that experience like? What did you see as the major differences? And just tell us about that.
Okay, I mean, fortunately, we got a chance to board the aircraft carrier INS Vikramaditya during my NDC tenure or course. We sailed from Mumbai to Karwar, and during the course amongst the Air Force officers, we were four from the MiG-29s, three pilots and me.
Wow.
So all of us were very keen that we go on this ship rather than some other ship, because there were six. It's a flotilla of six ships
Right,
which was
right, right.
sailing from Mumbai to Karwar together with all
Uh-huh.
NDC officers on board. Uh, so it was promised to us that all of you will be there on the Vikramaditya. The most amazing thing, after being in MiG-29 for such a long time, the most uh, exciting experience which was there to see this aircraft taking off from the deck, and we are actually standing on top and seeing the aircraft taking off. The sound of the afterburner and the way
Right.
it lands,
Mm,
it is totally different. It's a mesmerizing sight, very exciting experience.
mhm,
So of course we didn't have much of time to get into the technicalities of the aircraft. They're all, once they have a short takeoff and landing, as most of the people now know, on aircraft carriers, and the wings are folded and then they are parked on one side. Of course, naval operations, aircraft operations are a little different, very very streamlined. I mean, systematic way of a different way of going about it, I would say.
mm,
But being at Ozar, we had a naval liaison cell. I remember before that I was at maintenance command as a group captain, and Navy had requested to form a naval liaison cell at 11 BRD, and I supported that idea. Got the CNC's approval and sent it to Air Headquarters, where this naval liaison cell was formed at Nasik. So we had a lot of interaction with the Navy when I was commanding Ozar. Many times their officers used to visit us to exchange notes. Many times they required certain information from us, because being Air Force, we I think aviation is our bread and butter, and we have much more experience than other two services in operating the aircraft. So we were ready to help them out whenever they needed any information or any support. And in fact, once I was invited by the Naval Aircraft Yard at Goa to deliver a lecture, and they told me, "Sir, topic is yours." So I said, "Okay, I'll tell you the story of MiG-29." And after my presentation, I remember a lot of naval aviators came and thanked me for enlightening them on various facets of MiG-29 maintenance, and many things which they were not aware of. And I also remember at that time, INS Vikramaditya was commanded by one of my NDC course mate, now Admiral Purveer Das.
mhm.
And once he gave me a call, he said, "Sir, can I send my engineers to you and to familiarize themselves more with the aircraft and more with the base repair depot work?" I said, "Of course, send them." So we always welcomed and supported the Indian Navy in terms of giving whatever help we could give on MiG-29s. Of course, the aircraft is quite different, uh, mainly because of its deck operations. I think the engine has got much more life in that, but they have difficult other problem areas as well, which I am aware of. And I remember, recollect, that was my last week at 11 Base Repair Depot. and one of the I have just days notice I was given, or maybe just 12 hours notice that next day the naval chief is coming. It was Saturday, and I have to take him around at in the BRD, and I was told he's just got 1 hour. That's all. So within that 1 hour, I made him a presentation and took him around, and he asked me two very pertinent questions. One was how can 11 BRD help Indian Navy in its midlife upgrade MiG-29,
Mhm.
and second was support for the ejection seats because we were also by that time 11 BRD had started overhauling Su-30 aircraft as well, and the only ejection seat facility for Su-30 in India.
Got
That's
it.
only with 11 base repair depot. The seat, I believe, of MiG-29K is similar to Su-30. So he asked me two questions, and being the naval chief, I had to be very careful in my reply. And I told him, I said, sir, of course, we can give whatever is a helping hand required. Definitely, we'll undertake the task. Of course, with some resources which will be required from Indian Navy. So he said, okay. Uh, Probably later on that didn't work out, maybe because of the change of aircraft which they're planning. So I'll leave it at that.
Individual that you before noon of midway. Just need 7B, like your port type southeast, connection, speed 54, no midway, and fuel still active.
So, I wanted to talk about, the maintenance technical branch with respect to flight safety. Every time a MiG-21 crashes, there's all this talk about, it is a flying coffin and this and that, and, why are we flying such old aircraft? But today you've given us a comprehensive understanding of how meticulous maintenance and inspections go into an aircraft before releasing it for flight. Now, we have, as we all know, a chalta hai culture throughout the country, but there is no scope for chalta hai in aviation in general and in military aviation in particular. So this topic of people, the maintenance culture, and flight safety. I just love to hear your thoughts on how the Air Force creates this culture where people do not cut corners. They're very careful and meticulous about everything that they do because they recognize that even a small component can cause quite a disaster. So just love to hear your thoughts on that topic, sir.
Yeah, I think this first part about the MiG-21, probably a lot of flogging has taken place on this. And anytime, after my retirement, when I'm settled here, a lot of army veterans here are here. So I think the last MiG-21, when it crashed, some of them asked me privately, and I told them in a very clear, message that it's not. First of all, don't think that a aircraft is old. Aircraft, yes, it has been operating for many years now, but with a lot of studies which have been undertaken, yes, it has problems about its the redundancies because the design is old, so it doesn't, have that sort of redundancy as compared to a twin engine aircraft. But any aircraft which is offered for flying, it is certified fit for flying, and with thorough checks which are undertaken, and then only the pilot takes off. I think this part has been very clearly mentioned by many senior Air Force officers in other interviews as well. So I'll not elaborate much more on that. But the other part of flight safety, that's a very, very important question, and important aspect of maintenance, I would say. I would like to say that flight safety and maintenance go hand in hand. Whether you call it maintenance safety, flight safety, or maintenance, each and every action has to be related to flight safety. Means the aircraft has to fly safe at the end of the day or throughout its operation. And this part is inculcated into us right from the beginning because it's a very serious business. Military aviation is not a joke, or uh, as compared to civil airline where the maintenance or rather the maintenance procedures are much more simple or easier. Since it's a military aircraft, it will have snacks, it will have some difficult situations where the engineers and technicians of Indian Air Force have to undertake very challenging actions, activities. Our working hours are very, very long. I would say, there are no fixed working hours. There is no shift duty. So, in fact, we take pride in, finishing the job and then only packing up rather than leaving it for the next day. But flight safety is important from that aspect that your every action has to result into a safe flying operation. So you first of all, there are documents you have to go by those procedures, the very straight cut procedures which are given as per the maintenance manual of that particular type of aircraft. Secondly, there are chief engineering officers orders, CO orders are there, where based on the local conditions he will give you some instructions, so those are followed meticulously. Then of course there are TSI, the technical staff instructions given by air headquarters, which gives some very general broad lines and very specific uh, do's and don'ts based on the experience which is there for operating different types of aircraft. So each aircraft has got its own TSI, each fleet has got its own TSI, so people have to follow those. There's no way. One of the chiefs used to call it a straight jacket approach. That is how it is adopted. But apart from that, yes, there may be a situation where there is no defined. There is nothing defined in any of the publications. So the senior engineering officer or the chief engineering officer has to give guidance to the subordinates or all the officers and the airmen that this is how it has to be done. So then we have different systems of checks. We have maintenance safety ops officer at posted at each station now, along with the SASIO, Senior Aerospace Safety and Inspecting Officer. So they are independent. They undertake their checks at the squadron to see that the procedures are being followed. The Chief Engineering Officer will undertake certain checks himself to see that everything is going the way it should be. And I must tell you today that I'm very satisfied after after 35 years of service that throughout my entire this thing career I didn't have any maintenance related incident or accident which were caused due to some lapse or failure. Yes, failures do happen because it's a machine. There may be technical defects. A lot of people, understand this technical defect as a system failure. A system failure means some human error. It's not so. Technical defect is something because of the design related issue or material related issue, which probably has not been foreseen by the designer at that time, or the equipment has not performed in that particular manner. So technical defects are something which need to be resolved. Yes, if there is a series of defects which is happening, the repair agency has to undertake some remedial actions. But there are some defects which may occur for the first time, or which may be give some sort of surprise. So yes, this also brings in another aspect is to anticipate. An engineer or technician also has to anticipate, yes, this can go wrong, and has to actually work with that thing in his mind. And with my experience as a squad leader, I was in DMI those days, Directorate of Maintenance Inspection. I had written one article, An Eye for the Invisible, mainly to tell that what is not visible to you, you should need to see. If you take that sort of approach, or one takes that sort of approach, you can anticipate certain things from happening. And there are many such examples which we know that with careful handling or careful anticipation, a lot of technicians, a lot of engineers have prevented many serious incidents or accidents from happening. So flight safety is definitely a very important part, and it goes hand in hand with the maintenance.
Got it. Maybe one last question before I let you go is about indigenization. There's been this whole focus around trying to become less dependent on OEMs, imports. So, what has been your experience? What do you think are some of the challenges, some of the opportunities? What should we be doing to, get it right and indigenize a lot more?
Yes, uh, actually, Indian Air Force has come a long way as far as indigenization is concerned. and we started our work uh, probably in early 90s, especially after the breakdown of USSR, where the support was dwindling from the Russian OEMs, and together by Indian Air Force base repair depots, the HAL, the RCMS, with involvement of all, a lot of indigenization work was commenced then, and we had MSMEs coming forward who could undertake that sort of challenge. So we started with very very small items like sealing rings, nuts, bolts, split pins. But when we talk of these items, a lot of people think they're very they're very simple. What's so great about it? But let me tell you, each and every part of the aircraft, whether it's a pin or a nut or a bolt or a sealing ring, has got a very important role to play in that aircraft. And you know if if we take the history of military aviation anywhere or civil aviation also in the world, a lot of failures by these small components have resulted into very serious accidents. So the material of that, you know to decipher the original part and to re-engineer that is another challenging process, and to manufacture that with, initially we'd had problems of material not being available in the country, so we could, whatever material we could import, we started with that. Gradually we started finding out the equivalent material available within India, both then to the extent of indigenizing certain rubber raw material itself. Now there are some firms who are able to produce the raw material itself in this country. Unfortunately, metallurgy has been a little weak area, though Midhani is there, but Midhani, the MOQs required are very very large. So that is one part of it. Secondly, is the requirement which is there in the overall for these small parts is very very large. And if you have not indigenized them, any hold up of any particular spare, it results in delays. And any delay in overall of the aircraft, it results into the aircraft not being available to the for the operational flying. So we can't afford to have a single day's loss or any loss of time for overall procedure. And when you require tens of thousands of these parts in aircraft overall, you have to ensure a very very smooth supply chain of these spares. And that's why indigenization becomes very helpful, because you got indigenous source who are able to produce these items. So to the extent that we could reach 96 or 95% of indigenization in MiG-29 fleet in the early 2000 itself, and today we are almost, I think, 100% indigenized as far as the maintenance spares are required. They are also helpful for the squadrons, because for their routine maintenance, these spares are some of these spares are also required. So undertaking maintenance for with indigenized spares, because the availability is ensured, it becomes much more easier at the operating squadrons or the stations as well.
Right, right.
So this process was started with MiG-21, MiG-23, MiG-29s, later on for other aircraft also. But let me tell you that wherever we delayed the indigenization, we also face the serviceability issues on those fleets, because spares are very very important for Indian Air Force military aviation part of it. Spare not being available just puts the aircraft on ground. That's how, and I would relate that indigenization is directly related to your serviceability. If you are uh, got a good sound base with indigenized spares and supply chain, your serviceability is much more improved. Coming to the challenges, yes, there are few challenges. Initially, we had, the MSMEs also struggling, but today they are well established. The biggest challenge is the MOQs. There are certain types of spare. Now we're getting in more into, bigger components, LRUs, but our requirements may be little less.
Can you explain what some of these terms mean? What is an MOQ and what is an LRU?
The minimum order quantity required by a company. They all, the companies are basically commercial agencies where they require large orders. So when there are smaller spares, yes, we can assure them of uh, large quantities being ordered. But when there are components which are of little complex components, the requirements may be little less, but we still need to indigenize them. So this is a challenge where companies are a little reluctant because the minimum order quantity is less. But yes, there are few of them who are also willing to do.
Technically, you've not found that the capability exists, so that there's no technical challenge to producing some of these things.
The answer can be both yes and no. Because yes, why? Because we have good technical capability in this country. There's no doubt about it. Whether it is manufacturing or replicating what is required to be done. One of the challenges which I mentioned earlier was the metallurgy, because that raw material may not be available in the country. So that's one of the challenges. Uh, Second is the technology part of it. This is one challenge because the Russian aircraft technology is little different from the rest remaining of the world. So to replicate that sort of spare, I am not talking of mechanical spares. I am now coming to the electronic spares, avionic spares. It is little challenging because the technology is different,
Uh-huh.
much different from what is available in our country. So there we have tried to overcome this challenge by replacing indigenously produced pair, which is maybe totally different from the technology which the original equipment manufacturer in Russia might have used,
Mhm.
and we've got better results in terms of its performance. In fact, in MiG-29, I can give you an example where the power supply of radar in the early 90s, it used to be a very, very difficult or a big challenge for us because we used to have power supply failures. And the power supply of radar is not there, so the entire radar is not functioning. So this power supply was indigenously produced by a small firm in Nasik those days,
Wow. Hmm.
with a different technology. But and of course, all the flight testing and technical testing was undertaken, and they have proven themselves. Now the challenge is to make bigger parts like a MFD or a cockpit instrument, or that that can happen only when we are able to have our own indigenous platform like LCA or AMCA, which is going to come, where we'll have the whether it's a mission computer, or yesterday I read the article by our previous chief marshal Bhaduria. He's also amplified this part, that unless we have our own mission computers, our own software, the entire thing has to be indigenous. Once we are able to do that, then I think that challenge also should be, we should be able to overcome this uh, manufacture of C295. I think it's a very welcome move which has happened. Once we start getting into it, probably we'll have much more deeper and a sound indigenous base for supporting these aircraft.
Right, right.
I think that's all I could say about indigenization. I've been deeply involved in it, so and I've been very passionate about it. In fact, whatever items we were importing, or every time there's a list of provisioning which used to come, so each and every line we would see why it cannot be done in India. That's how we look at it now, and see how it can be done in India. And I think self reliance or Atmanirbhar Bharat, that is the bottom line. We need to achieve it.
Wonderful. So we've spent over an hour. Thank you so much for your service, but also thank you for speaking to the audience of the Blue Skies. Any parting thoughts as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think I must thank the Indian Air Force for giving me the best part of my life. As an engineer, as an Air Force officer, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've got the best of the dream career, I would say, in terms of appointments and exposures in different areas of work. I must also, appreciate and thank my seniors. First of all, we had it's a part of Air Force where it's a training by by the seniors in very informal way, and every day and every moment of our time, your seniors are telling you this is how it should be done. And we are very fortunate that I had very good seniors who groomed us well as made us better professional as engineers and technical officers in Indian Air Force. I must thank the technicians who have been with me. I worked hand in hand with them. Many of them were like buddies. I remember one of them at those days, Sergeant Ram Gopal, and later who retired in front of me as HFL, honorary flight lieutenant. We have always been working hand in hand. Ram Gopal is, of course, one name, but there are many of them who have been working with me, and we learned together a lot. And I owe my, success or career to all my seniors, friends, and subordinates. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Individual maneuver before visualize. Just need 7B, like your report type southeast, connection, before, somebody's way, and you will select it.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for this week. Join us again next week. In the meantime, sign up for updates at blueskiespodcast.com. There you'll find links to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also write to us with your comments, questions, suggestions, and feedback from the website or to blueskies@prganapati.com. Subscribe to the podcast on any podcasting platform such as Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even on YouTube. If you like what you heard, share it with your friends, give us a rating in your favorite podcasting app, and write us a review. It will help other people find us. I want to give my thanks to Saurav Chordia for our logo and Prithvik for the music. I want to reiterate that all the views expressed here are personal, and this podcast has not been approved by or reviewed by the Air Force, Ministry of Defense, or any branch of the government. In the meantime, stay safe and Jai Hind.